All opinions expressed on any program are those of the producer and are persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of DCTV. All producers and guests appearing on programs provide information and opinions based on information they consider to be reliable. DCTV does not affirm the completeness and accuracy. All DCTV members agree to adhere to DCTV's Statement of Compliance and are participants in a community medium forum where they're exercising their freedom of speech.
Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis. Welcome to the series on the network of global corporate control. Thanks to DCTV, to Carmen Stanley, Project Director, to Maurice Jackson, Studio Director, and to Cruchet Starnes, Audio and Teleprompter. Today's segment is live and is called Gratitude. Last week's segment was called Why Don't People Think? The answer is that scalar military weapons, also known as mind control, are interfering with our abilities to think. A critical mass is able to function despite this weaponry. Friends can help us to regain our bearings. Music also helps to stay centered. A couple of weeks ago, I played in a concert along with some of my friends. I tried to put the soundtrack on, but that wouldn't work. You can get it in the teleprompter. It's the Bach Concerto in C major for 2 harpsichords. Why is it relevant that I play chamber music, that is the cello, with friends? We make music with our friends when our brain is functioning. Making music is one way of strengthening our brains. As I've already told you, we like to make music and we like to appreciate music with our brains when our brain and its most important part functions. There's a part of the brain that's responsible for keeping tabs on the other 3 parts of the human brain. It's the 4th part of the brain, which is called the medial frontal cortex, that's responsible for higher functioning humans. We can tell whether we're able to feel empathy for our fellow human beings based on MRIs, that's magnetic resonance imagery, and PET, that's positron emission tomography, which show us that our medial frontal cortex is able to function. We can also tell whether we're using all 4 parts of our brain and whether we have learned how to use our medial frontal cortex. The inability to use our medial frontal cortex accounts for the fact that there's misery in the world. The reptilian part of our brains leads to domination, control, submission, and all of the traits that we need to bring under control by our medial frontal cortex. The first order of business is for us to know ourselves. In a tweet last year, I reminded you that we must know ourselves. I'm going to highlight where Betsy Malone told you that you need to know yourself. On the DCTV November 3, 2015 segment, we met Betsy Banfield Malone, who spoke to us about the International Association for Near-Death Studies. On Valentine's Day, Betsy wrote about the collective unconscious and told us to know thyself. Where are we? The United States military doesn't have to deal directly with the Knights of Malta in the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They can simply deal with the Joint Japan-U.S. Committee under the Status of Forces Agreement. I'm going to retweet this at the end of the teleprompter because it also gives you some background into how the world is going to change when we know who we really are. Why is this tweet talking about the military powers in the world? It's because the people who are really running the military powers of the world are using their medial frontal cortex to rein in that part of their brain that dominates or submits. I've been telling you all along that the world has already changed for the better. We just need to own up to it. Our inevitable progress to a peaceful world, and I'll explain to you how come it's inevitable. I'm summarizing my conversation with a Twitter account named Russia. He was scared that the elites admitted to a population control agenda. Quote, "I see no sense in a new world where 91% of us are dead." Actually, a critical mass of people are working to rein in that part of themselves which leads to misery in the world. We're becoming more aware and mastering the destructive aspects of ourselves. And now I want to speak extemporaneously about gratitude. Gratitude is very important because we need to be grateful for what's happening to us and who we are, and for the powers that we have in being human and empathetic. That means that we care about other people. That's built into the hardware of who we are. There's a recent book that was published which gives very compelling scientific data on how the brain functions. And what it turns out is that our brains function the way the brains of our most revered saints functioned. And that is that they control themselves. And there's one way that they can control themselves, and that's gratitude, being grateful for who they are and what their capabilities are. And this is not proud. One of the functions of the brain is intellectual. And the fact is that this is, it's a trap because we can be vain. We can be so proud of ourselves for being able to figure things out that we lose sight of the fact that we're more than that. And the ultimate thing that we are is we're connected to other people in many, many ways. And one of the ways, it's not just other people that we're connected to the universe, and we're connected to what we call God. Now, I'm not going to be talking about religion. I'm going to be talking about our spirituality. And the reason why I'm avoiding talking about religion is because when we talk about religion, we divide ourselves into various religions, and those are causes of war. I recently had a difficult time in a comment on the YouTube where somebody was making comments about religion, organized religion, rather than general spirituality, and the fact that we can transcend our material being into spirits. We're actually spirits. And this is something that many of us are aspiring to learn. And it is something that we can learn. Each one of us is capable of learning this, but before we can learn it, we have to be honest about what we're not doing. And some of us seem to be stuck in very negative patterns. And then the point of what we need to do is we need, first of all, to admit it. Nobody's going to change because somebody's telling them they have to change. It's all got to be from within. Now, but the fact is, we can receive guidance, and that's where gratitude comes in. If we're grateful to people who are helping us, and we're grateful to the fact that we have these abilities to transcend ourselves, we should be very grateful for this. If we're not, we're blocked somewhere. And we need to get to where that blockage is, and we need to own up to it. Now, this book that I've been telling you about, it's by Charles Gant, has an exercise in there which helps people to assess where their hang-ups are, where they're stuck, and how they're able to function. And of course, it's a lot easier if you try to get your friends to help you with this exercise, because people don't really want to admit their foibles, and they really need to in order to do this assessment. Now, what do I mean by all of this? What I've put in the teleprompter is I've gone into very great detail about what we've learned putting the puzzle pieces together, and we've learned a great deal about our history, which it's not our real history. We've learned that it was made up, that the Jesuits have taken the historic documents and destroyed them, and then they came up with something which doesn't bear any resemblance to what actually happened. So we have a great deal of work in reconstructing what our past was. And as an example, when we say that civilization is 5,000 years old, we know that's incorrect because we can date very accurately how old the oldest pyramids are by the maps that people that were building the pyramids drew on the ceiling, which shows how the stars move, and that's a very good way of keeping time. So, no, we don't know what the actual facts are, but we have, and we're learning who we are, and that's very, very important, because once we know that we're responsible for many of the negative traits that are keeping us in a world which is it's not optimal. It's a world where people are enslaved, where our money is so corrupt that we're not able to transcend this. We're not able to care for each other. Look at the distribution of income. We've got so few people who command so many resources. This power grab is what you would expect when people are not functioning with their entire brain. Once they learn how to do that, it's not going to be possible for them to do that. They're going to be prevented from starving other people, from operating in a way which is so asocial. And how can I be so convinced that that's going to happen? Well, it's because we have a lot of help. We've had help from the masters. And one of those masters was Jose Rizal, who figured out how to gain control of the world's wealth. And he did that. And then he set up an institution which would enable us to access this wealth in a way that we could do peacefully without creating war. It's the way of preventing World War III. And I've been documenting this, but of course, when I started doing this, I had no idea where it was going to lead, that we ourselves are responsible and guilty for oppressing the other people. Part of us is happy to be subjected to domination and control. So we need to assess where we are, and we need to get help. There is not a single person who can't be helped to attain a better functioning. And that's the point that I've been making. And gratitude. If our friends are giving us very good feedback, then we can all work together to overcome our domination and subjection, those aspects of us. So again, once we know that we've got the responsibility for our world and the functioning of our world, and once we know that the wealth of the world is not under the control of any individual or any group, like the network of global corporate control. And again, I'm going to explain to you how I know, and one of my jobs is to set people straight that the world's wealth belongs to all the people on Earth. And that's because of the way that Ferdinand Marcos, who was working for Jose Rizal, set up the World Bank. And when they deposited the wealth of the world in the World Bank, they subjected it to the statute of limitations, which says that anyone who tried to prove that they owned the world's wealth wasn't able to do that with the passage of time. Once the world's wealth was scattered in the World Bank, it's called the Global Debt Facility, which is the trust which contains the world's wealth. Once that trust continued past the number of years, 50 years, then nobody was able to argue that they were the ones who owned this wealth. And you can see from the correspondence that I've been writing that no, all of these people who claim that they own the world's wealth are just, they're just wasting everyone's time. It's not possible because of the statute of limitations, the way that Ferdinand Marcos and Jose Rizal set things up. This is a wonderful thing. And just last week, actually, I reiterated this to another person who was claiming that they were the ones who owned the world's wealth. And what they did was they went back to some of the early correspondence that I wrote before I even knew that there was a global debt facility. But what I did know is that the group that was claiming that they were in charge of the world's wealth, they were not transparent. They were not accountable. They claimed that they would be cleaning up the nuclear disaster in Fukushima without any controls. And so I knew that we weren't going to manage to clean up Fukushima when there was no accountability. So after a long correspondence, it was YCT, that group, and you can see the correspondence, and you can see the where I said, look, you're not able to prove that you own the world's wealth because of the statute of limitations. I could just say it in one sentence. And so, yeah, that's one of my jobs, is to repeat what Ferdinand Marcos and Jose Rizal set up. And they set it up because they were empathetic. And we all should have a great deal of gratitude to them for mastering this system and setting it up for us. So we're at the, we've inherited a wonderful system, and the most important thing is we've inherited the ability to recognize that system and to honor it by worrying about the welfare of all the rest of the people and transcending our own individual egos and becoming transcendent, which is what we are. So that's how I'm certain that we're in a different paradigm, because of who we are and because of what we've inherited. And you'll see there's a great difference in what I used to write and present at DCTV and what I'm now doing, because once you know that there's the statute of limitations, you don't have to spend all that time with each individual crook who's claiming that they own the world's wealth. You can just state that conclusion categorically. And also this business about gratitude. Once you know that you are grateful for everything that you've inherited, and you practice that habit of gratitude, you transform yourself into a human being who's capable of transcending even more. And the fact is, since we're all interconnected, we're all going to be working together to transcend our egotistical reptilian brain. That's our job. We've been given the ability to do exactly that. I don't want to belabor this, but that's where we are. Now, how do you practice gratitude? That's the point, is you have to practice things. Anything that you want to do, that you want to master, you don't just waltz in and do it. You have to practice it. You have to work at it. And that's also the thing about music. You don't just pick up an instrument, no matter how talented you are, and play it right off the bat. You have to learn how to play music. And you have to, any appreciation of music, you have to figure out what's come before. And yes, so that's where we are now. I wouldn't say we're on the lowest rung of the ladder in learning how to come up with a better world, but we're in an irrevocable process because of who we are and what we know so far. And the fact is, we do know a great deal. One of the things we know is that what we've been told is it's a bunch of lies. The media that's controlled by the mainstream is just giving us lies. And the politicians, they're not legitimate. We know that about Donald Trump. And, well, I'm going to be going into greater detail about some of the things that we know about the politicians. But suffice it to say that the politicians are not, they're part of the problem. And we have to learn how to work together to come up with different systems of governance. And this is not going to happen overnight, is it? No, it's not going to happen overnight. But one of the things that I put in the teleprompter is I showed you how the politicians are behaving, how they're assassinating chief justices, how the courts are not real courts. They've been usurped, and people are not given the protections that are supposedly available under the Constitution. And there's a way to, in the United States, to restore the Constitution. That's an Article 5 convention. There's no mechanism in other constitutions that I know of. So people are going to have to, they're going to have to work to figure out how to regain their the control over their institutions. And one of the main things that we have to regain control over is our money system, because the money system is it's hopelessly corrupt. And I'll explain in next week about seniorage, which shows that central banks are creating money out of thin air rather than gold, which is the real money. And once you use money, you use gold or other precious metals as currency, you don't have the ability to grab money and the things that money buys without being without understanding what true money is. And that mechanism, that's the way the corrupt people, the ones that are not using all of their brain, this is the mechanism that they've used to dominate and control. And as I've already mentioned, domination and control are second nature. We have to learn how to put that system under our control through our prefrontal cortex. And once you know that you can measure how somebody is functioning, you don't just have to see how they're functioning, although that's a very good way, but you can also measure this by looking at how the synapses are working under magnetic resonance imagery. And then we should realize that our politicians that have not transcended their reptilian nature, that are not using their prefrontal cortex, that are not, they don't have a full deck, they're not playing with a full deck. We need to put them out of the business of being in politics. And how we're all going to organize ourselves for this, there is a way. As far as currency goes, we then have the local communities issue currency, in addition to having the nations issue currency out of gold. And there's going to, it's going to have to be done sequentially, because otherwise somebody is going to be grabbing the true money and not distributing it to the individuals in the local communities. We have our work set out for us. But again, this is not, it's something that we should be capable of doing, and also because it's our nature. So, that's really all I've prepared. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about is our friendships, but I'll talk about that next week. We're getting through. I've only realized the reason for optimism about how we're certain to maintain our control over humanity's wealth. It's because of love and self-love. That's why Jose Rizal called the deposit of the world's wealth at the end of World War II the proclamation and declaration of the gift of love. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudis.